The Bone Orchard archivist. I still remember the day they called me insane. It was my father's voice, booming with that familiar authority, the kind that could silence a room. You're chasing shadows, Daniel. You're going to disgrace this family. His words cut deeper than the sterile instruments I used in the lab. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by family, a dinner that now tasted like ash. They had gathered to celebrate my promotion at the landfill. But I had chosen to share my findings instead. Burial irregularities, Dad. It's more than just trash. There are bodies beneath the landfill, remains with bizarre growths, evidence of necrotic bone pathology. We need to investigate further. Laughter erupted from my siblings, a chorus of derision. Get a grip, Danny, my sister chimed in, her eyes sparkling with mocking delight. What's next? You'll tell us the bones are talking to you? The laughter felt like nails driving through my heart. My mom, silent until then, finally chimed in. You need help, sweetheart. This obsession isn't healthy. And so I became a pariah in my own home. A cautionary tale, a son they warned each other about when they thought I wasn't listening. I was no longer Daniel. I was the crazy one, the delusional forensic waste engineer who could no longer separate fact from fiction. After that night, I disappeared into my work, finding solace in the sunken earth of the landfill. I spent years cataloging what others refused to see, anomalous remains buried beneath layers of refuse, tainted by an unnatural curse. I became obsessed with mapping the grotesque patterns of necrotic bone growth, surfing the thin lines of sanity, pulled deeper into the dark underbelly of mortality that my family had rejected. It wasn't until years later, with my name whispered with a mix of fear and respect in scientific circles, that I returned home. I drove through the familiar streets, memories flooding back like the stench of decay clinging to my clothes. I was no longer just their son. I was a harbinger of dark truths, a specter of warning. As I parked in front of the house I once called home, I felt the weight of all I had uncovered bearing down on me. Daniel! My mother greeted me with surprise, but I sensed the tension in her voice as I stepped inside. It's been so long. We thought you'd never come back. I had to, I said, the chill of my new reality wrapping around me like a shroud. I've discovered things you need to understand. My family gathered, their expressions shifting from surprise to unease. I opened my bag, pulling out a specimen jar containing a skeletal fragment, gleaming under the harsh kitchen lights. The room fell silent, their eyes widening with horror as I placed the jar on the table. Look, I urged, desperation lacing my words. This is what I've been working with. It's not just bone. It's a record of something darker, a spreading pestilence beneath our very feet. Danny, you need to stop, my father said, shaking his head. This isn't right. But I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. You don't understand. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone. I've seen what happens when we ignore the signs. The world is in danger. And then I felt it, a shift in the air, a weight pressing against my chest. I had been so absorbed in my work, I hadn't anticipated that they might witness the horrors I had faced. Together, we gathered around the table, and I began recounting the stories of the remains, the anomalies I had uncovered. As I spoke, shadows danced around the room, growing longer and darker. The bone fragment in the jar began to shift subtly, a grotesque beckoning that only I could see. Without warning, the lights flickered and the shadows surged, coiling around my family like serpents. Their laughter, their scorn, echoed in my mind, mingling with the sounds of my suppressed trauma. The jar cracked, releasing a noxious mist that filled the air. "Daniel!" my mother shrieked as the shadows pressed in closer, their forms indistinguishable from the darkness itself. "Mom!" I shouted, reaching for her, but the tendrils of shadow twisted around her. pulling her into the abyss. I could feel the darkness crawling up my arms, wrapping around my legs. "You mocked me!" I screamed into the suffocating void. "And now you see what your disbelief has wrought." In a final surge of determination, I focused on the connection I felt with the bone, the knowledge I had gained through my suffering. I understood now that the pestilence spread not just through the remains, but through ignorance and fear. As I faced my family, I felt the shadows retreat, leaving them panting and wide-eyed. The mist dissipated, and the last trace of darkness lifted from the room. They were alive, but changed. They had seen the tangible horror, the nightmares that had haunted me for years. The silence that followed was deafening. I had laid bare the truth, but at a cost. My family stood frozen, realizing too late the weight of their ridicule. I had become a living embodiment of their fears, a creature born from their denial. "I'm not crazy," I said, my voice trembling, "but you will be if you continue to ignore what's right in front of you." As I stepped out into the chill night air, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. I had faced my demons, not as a son seeking approval, but as a sentinel of truth. They would remember my warnings, perhaps not today, but the shadows would linger. They had been witnesses to the darkness of their disbelief. I walked away with the knowledge that I could endure and that the burden of truth, however heavy, was now mine to carry. I had survived the shadows. I had become something more. I had transformed from shame into an immortal reminder of what it meant to face the darkness and what it cost those who would refuse.